Hello and welcome to Life at PALS. Today we will go over another full GED Science practice test to help you prepare for your GED Science exam success. And yeah, I hope I can help you with your preparation and you will learn some new things. We'll get started immediately. So we can see the first question is about hurricanes. So here we have a picture taken from space that shows us a hurricane in Earth's atmosphere. We get a table with some information, average temperature of various large bodies of water, including the Atlantic Ocean, Arctic Ocean, Baltic Sea, Great Lakes of North America, and the Gulf of Mexico, and the temperatures, the average temperatures. First question, hurricanes such as the one pictured above gather strength as they pass over warm water. They get stronger as they pass over warm water. According to the chart above, over which of the following bodies of water would a hurricane gather the most strength? So we check which one has the highest temperature. We can see that is the Gulf of Mexico, so the correct answer here is D. Second question. Blood is made up of two main elements, parts. First, the plasma, which is largely water and proteins, and second, the solid components of blood, red blood cells, white cells, and platelets, which are important for clotting. If a patient has lost a lot of blood, he or she may receive a transfusion of whole blood. Lost a lot of blood, a transfusion of whole blood, which includes red blood cells and plasma. So whole blood includes red blood cells and plasma. However, sometimes the patient needs only an increase in the volume of liquid in his bloodstream, in which case plasma alone may be submitted, not red blood cells. A person must be tested for blood type before receiving certain kinds of transfusions because of differences in the way that red blood cells react to one another. Under what conditions would such testing be necessary? For whole blood transfusions only, for plasma transfusions only, for both whole blood transfusions and plasma transfusions, and if the patient has not lost any blood. So we were told in the reading above that whole blood transfusions contain red blood cells and plasma, whereas plasma transfusions contain plasma alone and not red blood cells. In the question we get the information that a person must be tested for the blood type before a transfusion sometimes because red blood cells react to one another. So the testing is only about the red blood cells, not about the plasma, and therefore testing for blood type is only required for whole blood transfusions, not for plasma transfusions. Again, because plasma transfusions do not contain red blood cells. So yeah, one thing I can mention as well, if we go a little bit too fast for you and you want to attempt the questions by yourself, you can pause the video anytime and yeah, try to answer the questions before I do and explain them. So next question is number 3 to 5, which are based on the following information. Coal is formed from the material of plants and other organisms that lived on land and whose remains were covered by mud, which later became rock. Coal is classified by carbon content. So here we have the different types of coal, peat, the remains of plants and organisms that, because they were covered in bogs, were prevented by a lack of oxygen from completely decaying. It's still porous, soft brown mass, and peat has a carbon content of 52 to 60%. And we have lignite. In time, peat turns into lignite, a soft coal-like substance that has a carbon content of 60 to 65%. Then we have subbituminous coal. With more time, heat, and pressure, lignite changes into subbituminous coal, which has about 65 to 75 carbon content. Then we have bituminous coal. After even more heat and pressure, subbituminous coal changes into bituminous coal with a carbon level of 75 to 85. And then we have anthracite, which is bituminous coal subjected to another million years of heat and pressure. And anthracite has a carbon level of 85 to 95% and will burn only at extremely high temperatures. So here we get a little bit of extra information about the anthracite, that it will only burn at very high temperatures, and then for all the others we get the carbon content, which might be important for the next questions. A researcher analyzes a piece of coal and finds that it is unusually dense and burns only when subjected to very intense heat. What is the lowest percentage of carbon that this coal likely contains? Again, so this coal has high density and only burns when subjected to very intense heat. So therefore, this is probably anthracite. And because we were told that it will only burn at extremely high temperatures, and we can probably assume that it has the highest density as well, because these different types of coal form with more and more and more pressure over time, and compressing the material, making it more dense probably. So that's something we can infer from the different steps that we read through. And then we are asking for the lowest percentage of that specific type of coal. So it's 85 to 95. The lowest percentage here is 85. So that is the answer, 85%. Question 4. Steel is made in a process in which iron is combined with carbon at extremely high temperatures. Which of the following types of coal might be most useful in this process? So we are combining iron with carbon and nothing else. So we only want carbon as pure as possible at extremely high temperatures. So that sounds very much like anthracite again. Drag and drop the appropriate type of coal in each box. The appropriate type. So only one in each box, I would say. The type of coal most likely found closest to the surface of the Earth, that should be peat, because over time these different types of coals get deeper into the Earth's layers. So peat is found more or less at the surface, so that is going to be A. And the type of coal that contains the greatest amount of carbon per kilogram, that should be anthracite, D. Question 6 to 7. Most seeds will germinate when they have moisture, oxygen, and the right temperature. But different seeds need different proportions of each of these ingredients. Most seeds require a temperature between 15 and 27 degrees Celsius to germinate, although some seeds, such as the maple, can germinate in far colder climates, so below these temperatures. And some other seeds, such as corn, require warmer temperatures. So corn requires warmer temperatures, so above 15 to 27. Before germination, seeds must absorb water, but too much absorption of water will encourage the growth of fungus, which can halt the germination process. So not too much water. Which of the following environments would be most suitable for the germination of corn seeds? So we just learned that corn requires warmer temperatures than the average, which is between 15 to 27 degrees. A moist sealed container at 26 degrees centigrade. So we can probably exclude that because it's sealed, which means that the oxygen, which is required as well, will eventually be used up by the seed. Plus 26 centigrade is in the normal range, and we learned that corn requires warmer temperatures. An arid desert. Plain arid means no water, so no moisture, therefore we can exclude that. A moist plowed field. Plowed means it's aerated. No, the earth is soft, so that oxygen can get into the soil at 30 degrees centigrade. So it's above our average, slightly, not too much. So that sounds very good. It's probably C. An environment suitable for maple seed growth. No, because we learned that maple seeds germinate at far colder temperatures, whereas corn requires higher temperatures. So C is the correct answer. Based on the information in the passage, which of the following is most likely true? Maple seeds can germinate at any temperature. That is probably wrong. They require colder temperatures. Although it says can, which means they eventually could grow at warmer temperatures too. So let's actually wait with crossing that out. Corn is difficult to grow. That's way too general. Water in limited amounts is vital to the germination process. That sounds very good. So it's probably going to be C. Maple seeds and corn seeds require different amounts of oxygen. Nope, different temperature, but not different oxygen. Based on the information in the passage, this is, we don't get a lot of information about that. It doesn't say it any, no, it says colder usually. So C makes sense because the last part of the paragraph is exactly about that. No, it says that moisture, water is needed, but not too much, so water in limited amounts. During periods of intense activity, the cells of the body need more oxygen than the body is supplying, a situation known as oxygen debt. During these periods, the body cells briefly switch to anaerobic respiration, which produces lactic acid. The buildup of lactic acid in the tissues signals the brain to increase breathing and heart rates, thus supplying the body with more oxygen. After which of the following activities would lactic acid most likely be found in the body? So, what are we told about lactic acid? That during these periods, so what periods are we talking about? Periods of intense activity where the body needs more oxygen. The body cells briefly switch to anaerobic respiration, which produces lactic acid. So anaerobic respiration is the source of lactic acid. And this happens during intense activity. Walking to work, playing an intense game of chess. That's probably more exhausting for the brain, not so much for the muscles. So not this. Walking doesn't sound very exhausting either. Taking an aerobics class, that sounds quite exhausting. Watching a scary movie, yes. So aerobics is some kind of sports class. So doing some sports, intense activity should be C. During periods that are unfavorable for growth, some plants become dormant. Woody plants are protected during such periods by their bark. It's the outer layer of a tree, the bark. Perennial plants die above ground, but their roots remain alive, such as onions or potatoes. Annual plants die, but their seeds survive to continue the life of the species. Which of the following would most likely be a time of year during which plants might lie dormant? That is the winter, where it's cold and snowing, less hours of sunlight. So these are all conditions that are unfavorable for growth in the winter. Question 10 refers to the following diagram, which shows layers of soil and rock. We have the topsoil here, then rock layer 1, 2, 3, 4. The diagram above shows various layers of rock that have been deposited over time. Drag and drop the rock layers into the appropriate boxes. The oldest rock layer, that should be rock layer D, the lowest rock layer, because they have deposited over time, and the nearest is the topsoil or rock layer 1, so A. 11 refers to the following diagram, which shows a food chain, which shows that algae, the producers, are eaten by copepods, which are eaten by minnows, which are eaten by bass. The copepods are some plankton-like, very small crab-like animals. Minnows, small fish, bass, bigger fish. Algae are unicellular plants that live in water. Plant-like organisms. Which of the following conclusions is most likely to be true regarding the food chain above? Bass are the only fish that eat minnows. So we could eventually conclude that, but usually, or in general, the food chain does not show all feeding relationships in an ecosystem. A food chain only shows the way or that energy takes through an ecosystem from one organism to the next, but there are usually many, many different possibilities for that. And another diagram that shows all the feeding links in an ecosystem is a food web. So since we have a food chain here, it doesn't show all the feeding relationships. It only shows one possible way that the energy can flow through our ecosystem, that is from algae to copepods to minnows to bass, but it doesn't mean that bass doesn't have any other food source. Or in other words as well, it doesn't mean that there is not any other organism potentially in our food web that feeds on minnows as well. So therefore it's unlikely A. Minnows are bigger than bass. Well, unlikely because bass feed on minnows, but in general we just don't get any information about the size of the organisms from our food chain. So not enough information for B to be correct. Bass benefits in some ways from the existence of copepods. That sounds correct. Let's check D. Bass could simply eliminate the middlemen by eating algae. Well, bass don't eat algae. They feed on minnows. So yeah, D doesn't really make sense. C makes sense. They do in some ways benefit from the existence of copepods because copepods are eaten by minnows, which means if there are a lot of copepods, there will be a lot of minnows, which means there is more food for basses to eat. 12 is based on the following passage. Passive protection is a method by which organisms protect themselves from predators, not by fighting, but by their appearance, smell, or sound. Protective resemblance is a type of passive protection in which an animal's coloring mimics the natural environment, acting as a kind of camouflage. Protective mimicry is another type of passive protection in which a defenseless organism resembles a more powerful organism. Another interesting example of passive protection is the monarch butterfly, which smells and tastes so bad that other organisms two other organisms that virtually no other animal or insect will eat it, except some specific bird species that do eat them. Which of the following is not an example of passive protection? A chameleon changes its color to blend in with a leaf in order to avoid predators. That's our first example. Protective resemblance, which animal's coloring mimics the natural environment, so it's not A. The non-poisonous scarlet king snake develops coloration very similar to that of the poisonous eastern coral snake. So that is an example of protective mimicry. So the non-poisonous snake resembles a poisonous snake, a venomous snake. An orchid flower mimics a female insect in order to lure male insects to it, so the flower can be pollinated. So this is a kind of mimicry as well, but not protective mimicry. So that should be the correct answer. Let's check D. An edible vine adapts its leaves to match the inedible plant that it is climbing. Yes, so that's an example of protective mimicry as well, resembling a more dangerous, in this case again a poisonous organism, a part of the organism. So the correct answer here is C. The density of seawater is 1029 kilograms per meter cubed. 1 kilogram or liter, 1 kilogram per liter equals 1000 kilogram per meter cube. What is the density of sea water in kilograms per liter? So we're told that normal water has a density of 1000 kilograms per meter cube. No. We're just told, okay, this is the conversion factor, that 1000 kilogram per meter cube is the same as 1 kilogram per liter. So we have 1029 kilogram per meter cube, which means it should be 1.029. 14. Researchers in a particular city theorize that decreasing the greenhouse gases, so they have theorized in this case means they have some kind of idea or hypothesis, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions in the city will result in better respiratory health. Yeah, that's a hypothesis for its citizens. In order to test this hypothesis, they institute 2 programs. The first program provides commuters with financial incentives to take public transport, and instead of their personal vehicle, I guess. Commuters provides incentives to take public transport, and the second program initiates a respiratory care education campaign and provides free clinics for citizens suffering from respiratory health issues. During the 5 years after the researchers institute the 2 programs, greenhouse gas emissions in the city decreased by 50%, and a citywide survey reveals that cases of illness due to respiratory problems have decreased by 65%. Researchers therefore conclude that the theory was correct. Decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions resulted in better respiratory health for local citizens. Which of the following best shows why the researchers' conclusion is flawed? So what's the problem with the experiment? That's the question basically. They failed to compare the city's air quality to that of any other towns. So they don't know if greenhouse gases decreased more or less than they should have. They should have tested the city's drinking water too, since that has greater effect on citizens' health than air quality does. So the first 2 are not the correct answers. A might be compelling, but since we are comparing the decrease in greenhouse gases to respiratory health, before and after, this would be some kind of control group, but it's not really important here in this case. They should have tested the city's drinking water. Yeah, drinking water, again, it's about respiratory health, so probably doesn't affect that so much. The conclusion doesn't explain the 50% difference between the decrease in greenhouse gases and the decrease in respiratory problems. Well, they don't have to change by the same percentage. The important thing of interest is here that if one goes down, does the other go down as well? Not necessarily by how much, so don't need to explain the difference in percentage decrease. They institute 2 programs instead of 1, so they can't be sure which is responsible for the resulting health improvements, and that is the correct answer. So they're doing basically 2 experiments at the same time. They institute 2 programs at the same time. They do provide commuters with financial incentives to take public transport. So more commuters were taking public transport, which probably lowered the greenhouse gas emissions and improved the air quality in the town. But at the same time, they initiated the second program, which was helping or giving free clinics to citizens suffering from respiratory health issues. So that probably eventually increased the health of the people in terms of their respiratory health. So since they changed these two things at the same time, in our results we can't really say, we don't really know which of the two, the reduction in greenhouse gases or the free clinics and improvement of for respiratory health issues. We don't really know which of the two in the end led to the decrease in respiratory problems in the citizens. Was it the free clinics or was it the decrease in greenhouse gases? So therefore, the experiment was flawed. So just doing one change would have given them more clear results potentially. So in general, this is a question about experimental design, which is part of the scientific method. In experiments, you should usually just have one independent variable, one thing that you change on purpose, and then see its effect, the effect of the change on what you measure, the dependent variable. If you're changing more than one thing at the same time, and you measure the outcome, you don't know which of your two or more changes actually led to your change in the dependent variable. So usually each experiment, rule of thumb, one independent variable only, and the remaining variables should remain constant throughout the whole experiment. Lobsters are crustaceans commonly found in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean off the North American coast between Maine and North Carolina. Researchers studied the weights of these creatures over a period of a few years. Some of the results are displayed in the table below. So we're given the average weight of the lobsters between 2005 and 2009. The researchers hope to find the most commonly occurring lobster weight for the lobsters studied during the 5-year period shown above. For that, what do they have to calculate? The average, the mode, the median, the range. So this is something that you need to know. Simple statistics, simple data analysis. And the most occurring value, the most commonly occurring value is called the mode. The median is the middle value. If we sort our numbers from lowest to highest, then the number in the middle is the median. The average is we are adding all values up and dividing by the number of values that we have. So we would take the sum of all of these and then divide it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get the average or the mean. Now, mean is another word for average. Same thing. And the range is the difference between the highest and the lowest value. So from the lowest to the highest would be the range. So what is the mode? We can see that the only number that's appearing twice is 0.43, so therefore that is the mode. Amy tracks the monthly snowfall in 2 areas over a period of several months. One area is a region of high elevation and the other is an area of low elevation. Also high up, maybe somewhere in the mountains, and then somewhere sea level, low elevation. The table below displays her results. So we have the different months, November, December, January, February, March, and then the different areas, low elevation first and then high elevation second. And the last column shows us the height of the snow, I guess. What is the mean of the data shown in the table? So to find this, we sum up all these numbers, we add them all together, and then we divide by the number of numbers that we have, and we have in total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the result that we get from summing this up, we will divide this by 10. So let's get the sum of all these numbers. That is 9.3. So then adding them all up together, we should get 9.3. We divide this by 10, which gives us 0.93, and that is the mean, 0.93. Scientists calculate the pressure within a gas by using the following equation, where P is the gas pressure, N is the number of particles in the gas, K is a constant, the gas constant, T is the temperature of the gas, V is the volume of the gas. If the number of particles in the gas decreases, which of the following changes will increase the pressure? So what we're doing, what this is saying here, the numbers of particles are decreased, so a number in the numerator decreases. So if we decrease a number in the numerator, that would usually decrease our result. So what do we have to change to our values to actually get an increase that outweighs the decrease of decreasing the number of particles? Decreasing both the volume and the temperature. Decreasing the volume, decreasing the temperature. So decreasing the temperature, same effect as the number of particles. Decreasing the volume, if we decrease a number in the denominator, that will cause an increase in our result. Now, if we think about something like 12 over 6 is equal to 2, if we now make this number smaller, something like 12 over 3, that will be equal to 4. We can see the result increases by making the denominator smaller. So that sounds good. Decreasing the volume but decreasing the temperature doesn't sound good. Increasing both volume and the temperature, so this is the opposite. Increasing the temperature sounds good, but increasing the volume would lead to a further decrease, so B is not correct either. Increasing the volume and decreasing the temperature, that would lead to a very, very large decrease in our pressure, so last one is probably correct. Decreasing the volume, yes. Making that smaller will increase the pressure, and increasing the temperature of the gas, yes, that will lead to a larger, that will outweigh the decreasing the numbers of particles, leading to a greater increase. There are 4 basic types of chemical reactions as shown in the table below. Combination or addition reactions, A plus B gives a new chemical C. As a combination of the 2 reactants. Decomposition is the opposite. You have one reactant that breaks down into 2 products. Single displacement, A plus BC gives B plus AC. So we can see that A has replaced or displaced the B connected to the C. Double displacement, yes, the same as the single displacement, just with 2 chemicals at the same time. In this case, C swaps the position with B. So B displaces C and C displaces B. The balanced chemical equation describing the reaction between hydrogen and fluorine is shown below. H2 plus F2 gives 2HF. Which of the 4 basic types is this? Well, it should be pretty straightforward. We see we have 2 reactants and they combine to form 1 product, so therefore it's a combination or addition reaction. 19 refers to the following graph. This shows the axes are not labeled, so there should actually be a label here. This is probably years, but there should be a label here as too. Labels are missing, not a very good graph. According to the chart above, which of the following regions will have the largest projected increase in the number of AIDS deaths between 2011 and 2020? So this should be the number of AIDS deaths here. So X is the number of AIDS deaths per year. Africa, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, or North America. So the question is, and we have to read carefully here, projected increase between 2011 and 2020. So we're looking at a period, for this period here, but they're not asking which country has the highest AIDS deaths. That would be Africa. So this is a very easy to answer this question wrong, I think. One more time, they're not asking for the greatest number, they're asking for the projected increase. So greatest increase in the number of AIDS deaths. And we can see the country that shows the greatest increase. And this one goes up most towards the end, from around 5,000 to 1,800 or something like this. This one is fairly high too, from 0 to 1,000. So we can see that the greatest increase is from here to here, and that is South and Southeast Asia. Answer B. Question 23 and 24. For years, paleontologists have debated whether the Archeopteryx, a creature that lived 150 million years ago, was an early species of bird or dinosaur. So bird or dinosaur, Archeopteryx. That spent most of its time on the ground. So dinosaur on the ground, bird in the air. Its feathers and wings were of only limited use, they say, and could not sustain flight. Ornithologists, are people who study birds, on the other hand, believe that Archeopteryx was first and foremost a bird. As evidence, they point to fossil remains of the creature that show its claws were curved so that it could perch on tree limbs. So it had curved claws so that it can perch or grab onto tree limbs. Curved claws would have prevented the animal from walking or running quickly on the ground. Curved claws prevent walking or running. So paleontologists believe that it spent most of its time on the ground, so they are more for land animal, dinosaur theory, because feathers and wings were only of limited use, could not sustain flight. Ornithologists say the opposite. Because of the curved claws, they think it may have had trouble walking or running, so more flying or gliding around. According to paleontologists, so now we're talking about the first paragraph, the Archeopteryx was incapable of, what could it not do? Incapable of, its feathers and wings were only limited use. They say it could not sustain flight, so it couldn't fly. That's what they say, incapable of flight. According to the theory, advanced by the ornithologists. So now we are talking about the second paragraph. Which of the following is most likely to have been a modern-day descendant of the Archeopteryx? The lizard is a reptile, the alligator is a reptile, the cow is a mammal. Oh, the mosquito is an insect, so it's definitely not the mosquito. So it's lizard and alligator. Following is most likely to have been a modern-day descendant of the Archeopteryx. It's probably the lizard. Makes most sense, although it's not a very good question because it doesn't really relate to any of the information. I mean, lizards, yeah, I guess they have eventually claws that can perch on tree limbs too and climb trees. Alligators can't really do that. But yeah, not the best question here. In science, work is defined as the component of a force parallel to motion, work done, multiplied by its displacement. So what this says is basically work equals force times distance or displacement. One reason that individuals use ramps rather than lifting heavy items straight up is that using a ramp increases the total displacement, but reduces the amount of force required to move an object by exactly the same amount as the increase in displacement, provided that the ramp's surface is frictionless. So we lift something up from here to here, a box or something, to get it up here. It's easier if you would use a ramp and you slide the box up because that increases the distance, the displacement, and the amount of work done. So let's see what the question is. According to the information, the paragraph, using a ramp with a frictionless surface will have which of the following effects? It will reduce the total amount of work required to move an object will decrease, total amount of work required to move an object will increase, total amount of work required to move an object remains the same. The amount of work required to move an object will initially increase but later decrease. So what's true is that the amount of work required stays the same. Work is as well equal to energy transferred. So, and in the end, what we are doing is we are lifting the box up to a higher position, which means it gains potential energy, gravitational potential energy. And yeah, the difference in height before and after is the same in the end. So therefore the change in energy is the same, and therefore the work done is the same as well. Now, what we are told is by increasing the distance or displacement, we are decreasing the force needed to do the work. So smaller number multiplied by larger number can give us the same result. So they will change by the same factor. If you double the distance, you will halve the force and you will get the same amount of work done. Below is a table listing the concentrations of chemicals found in human blood and urine. In the blood we have albumin, chloride, glucose, phosphate, urea. In the urine we have no albumin, chloride yes but less, no glucose, much less phosphate, and urea. So chloride and urea and some phosphate. Based on the table above, which of the following chemicals is not normally found in urine? So that's either glucose or albumin, albumin only, chloride only, glucose only, albumin and glucose, yes. In a certain forest, foxes prey on rabbits. A virus that infects only rabbits spreads through the forest, killing many rabbits. Which of the following is most likely to occur to the fox population? Now, again, we have some kind of food chain. Foxes prey on rabbits, which means foxes eat rabbits. That's what foxes prey on rabbits means. So if the number of foxes decreases, that means the number of rabbits decreases because of the virus. That means foxes will have less food available. The source of food decreases. That means their population will eventually decrease too. It will decrease because the foxes will not have enough food. That sounds correct. Suffer from the virus. No, the virus is a rabbit virus. It will increase because the foxes will no longer need to compete with the rabbits for food. They don't compete with the rabbits for food. Rabbits are their food. Will increase because the foxes will evolve to become more resistant to the disease. Again, has nothing to do with that. So A is the correct answer. A solar eclipse is a celestial event during which the sun appears partially or totally obstructed when viewed from a certain location on Earth. The diagram below shows a solar eclipse. You can see the Earth here, the Moon here, the Moon throwing a shadow on Earth's surface. So if you are right in the umbra, then you will see the eclipse. And yeah, here you will see a little bit of the eclipse. In the penumbra. Based on the information above, which of the following is most likely to be true during a solar eclipse? The entire moon is in the penumbra or shadow of the Earth. The moon is in the shadow of the Earth? No, that is wrong. The moon is directly between the sun and the Earth, thus placing certain regions of Earth within the moon's umbra, or deepest part of the shadow, so that the sun's rays are not visible from those regions. That is exactly what the diagram shows. So B is the correct answer. The moon is directly between the sun and the Earth, throwing its shadow on Earth's surface. So let's check the other ones. Light rays from the Earth. There are no light rays coming from the Earth. No, light rays come from the sun. Intercept those from the sun. Okay, that doesn't make sense at all. The sun is in the umbra. The sun is in the shadow. No, that's because the sun produces light. It is not in the shade, the shadow. So, yeah, and what makes sense is answer B. '29 and 30. Pathogenic microbes, microorganisms that cause a disease. So immediately our definition for that. What is a pathogenic microbe? A microorganism that causes disease. Include viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. So 4 different types of microorganisms. Such microbes can invade hosts through several pathways, including through the air, through direct or indirect physical contact, through blood, and through other bodily fluids. Medical researchers are currently attempting to find better treatments for microbial diseases by developing new pharmaceuticals. Currently, many doctors prescribe penicillin, which is derived from the spores of a fungus and which prevents the growth of new bacteria, to treat bacteria-induced microbial diseases. And antiviral compounds to combat viruses. However, such treatments do not always eradicate the relevant diseases, and while some microbe-induced illnesses, such as chickenpox, may not be life-threatening, others, such as those that cause Ebola, can be deadly. Below is a chart of some common microbe-induced illnesses. Common cold, caused by a virus. Strep throat, caused by bacteria. Athlete's foot, caused by yeast, which is a fungus. And this is something you should know. Yeast is a fungus. And malaria is caused by a malaria protist, another word for protozoa. So virus, bacteria, fungus, protist. Which of the following is most likely treatable with penicillin? What did we learn about penicillin? It's an antibiotic. which is derived from spores of a fungus, which prevents the growth of new bacteria. So it's used for treating bacteria-induced diseases. So which throat, bacterium, that's our answer, B. Medical researchers fear that preventing those suffering from microbial diseases from having physical contact with others may not be sufficient to stop the spread of such diseases. Which of the following quotes from the passage supports this idea? Many doctors prescribe penicillin. That's about killing bacteria. Such treatments do not always eradicate the relevant disease. However, some microbe-induced illnesses, such as chickenpox, may not be life-threatening. That's not about having physical contact may not be sufficient to stop the spread of diseases. Having physical contact may not be sufficient to stop the spread. Pathogenic microbes can cause diseases. Nope. Such microbes can invade hosts through several pathways. Now, this is what our question is about. So, how can diseases spread? Not only by physical contact, but as well through the air, through indirect contact, through blood, through other bodily fluids. So, mainly through the air, indirect contact. This is why it's not enough to stop people from having direct contact only. Heredity traits are encoded by genes that are located on chromosomes. Chromosomes come in pairs, and the pair of genes for a particular feature determines the characteristics of that trait. In many cases, genes exhibit a pattern called classical dominance. In such cases, a gene for a dominant trait is always expressed when present. An individual may have only a dominant gene and have 2 copies of that gene, or an individual may be a hybrid and have 1 dominant gene and 1 recessive gene. In hybrids, the dominant gene hides the expression of the recessive gene. A recessive gene is expressed only when both copies of the gene are recessive. In literature, dominant genes are represented by capital letters, while recessive genes are represented by lowercase letters. So in general, this usage of gene is correct. Here too. Here too. And then from here on, dominant trait, the correct word should actually be allele. So if you're not very familiar with this topic, there's a lesson on inheritance. Inheritance is fairly easy to understand, but can be a bit confusing in the beginning. So because it has a lot of key vocabulary that you need to understand. So a gene, a length of DNA, that codes for a trait or a protein which causes the trait in the end, and an allele or alleles are versions of a gene. And then we have often a dominant version and a recessive version. But yeah, anyway, the text is understandable, keeping the word gene in there, but it should be alleles. In pea plants, pea color is a hereditary trait. Green comes from a dominant allele. So we can maybe write this down. Green is the dominant allele, so we give it a capital G. Yellow comes from a recessive allele, so we give it the small g. We usually keep the same letter for the same gene. So that if a plant has one gene for green and one gene for yellow, that plant will produce green peas. No? So we were told that if we have two dominant alleles, the plant will be green. If we have a hybrid, then it will be green too. No? The dominant allele masks the effect, overrides the effect of the recessive allele, and only if we have the combination of two small g's, then the peas will be yellow. The following Punnett square shows the results when two hybrid pea plants produce new plants. Punnett squares predict the likelihood of a specific gene combination occurring in the offspring. Approximately 75% of the offspring in this case are green and the rest are yellow. So hybrid parents, so these are the egg cells, which are big G and small g, and same for the sperm cells. Big G, small d. Where do these egg cells come from? They come from a female plant that was a hybrid, so its cells have this combination. When gametes, when sex cells are produced, the chromosome pairs split. No? So sex cells are haploid, they have only half a set of chromosomes. Same is true for the male plant. Plant itself has cells with a combination of big G, small g, and the sperm cells then have half the number of chromosomes. So the pairing chromosomes, the partners are split up in the sperm cell, so each sperm cell will receive one allele. Which of the following is the best explanation for the results displayed in this Punnett square? One parent plant had only the yellow gene, one parent plant had only the dominant gene, neither parent plant had the hidden gene for yellow. Both parent plants were hybrids and carried the hidden gene for yellow. Yes, that's what it told us in the text as well. Two hybrid pea plants were crossed. So we have the answer right here in the text. Dimples result from a dominant gene, and a lack of dimples results from a recessive gene. So dimples, dominant, no dimples, recessive. Based on the information in the passage, which of the following will be true for an individual who is a hybrid? Hybrid, big D, small d. That individual will have dimples. That individual has an equal chance of either having or not having dimples. That individual will have a dimple on one side of his face but not on the other. That individual will have no dimples. So according on the passage again, in monohybrid inheritance and simple inheritance with a gene, a dominant and a recessive allele, now it's important to understand that genes don't blend in this case. The dominant allele completely covers up the effect of the recessive allele. So dominant in this case is dimples, so an organism that has a hybrid, person that is a hybrid will have dimples in the same way that a person has when the person has two dominant copies of the gene. So there's no visible difference between them. So A is the correct answer. The person will have dimples. The graph below shows a science experiment in which a sample of ice at -20 degrees Celsius is heated to 120 degrees Celsius. During the experiment, the ice melted into water and then the water boiled and turned to steam. Based on the information presented above, which of the following statements is most accurate? So we see the graph. Temperature rises, stays stable, rises, stays stable, rises. Where it stays stable, it's melting and boiling. The temperature of the sample increased at the same rate throughout the experiment. Nope, we can see that it changes. So it doesn't increase at the same rate. That would be a linear line. Then A would be correct. The sample remained as ice throughout most of the experiment. No ice is only here. When it's melting, that means it's liquid and then later gaseous. The sample increased in temperature, then melted, and then increased in temperature again, and then boiled, and then increased in temperature. That sounds very accurate as a description of the graph. Increasing the temperature, melting, increasing in temperature, boiling, increasing in temperature. The sample melted and increased in temperature at the same time. Nope, when it's melting we can see the temperature is not increasing. 34. Select the area on the graph during which the entire sample consists of liquid water. During melting, we have a mixture of solid ice and liquid water. During boiling, we have a mixture of liquid water and water vapor. So the only time when the whole sample is liquid is at point C. Bees are insects that play an important role in any ecosystem that has flowering plants. Bees serve as primary pollinators and enable flowering plants to reproduce. Scientists estimate that nearly 1/3 of the human food supply consists of plants that depend on bees for pollination. Based on the information above, which characteristic of bees is most important to an ecosystem? Bees create honey for human consumption. Nope, nothing about honey up here. Bees serve as pollinators. Yes. No, they pollinate other plants and help them to reproduce. So bees, yeah, definitely bee. And oh, where did our questions go? Just a moment. Yeah, so that was the last question in this test. So this test has only 35 questions. Yeah, I hope you have learned something new. I hope I could help you preparing for your GED test. I wish you good luck for taking your test in the future, and I hope you get the score that you wish for. Until then, maybe see you in my next screencast, and I wish you all the best. Goodbye.